Hello and welcome. My name is Racho, and today we are covering the new Warframe Jade. Now, Jade is a very cool Warframe, but I think her Exalted is bugged. But I will get to that when we get to her fourth ability, which is her Exalted ability. How do you get Jade? Well, pretty simple. You have to first complete the new quest, the Jade Shadows quest, which you can only do after completing new. But she does have a pity system where you will be able to buy her parts from orders from the relay on Mercury. That's also where the Operation Belly of the Beast is taking place, where you can get all yourself all those Eidolon Arcanes, and also you go through the normal Ascension mission, except it's called the Operation version of it. But basically it plays the same, it just has more Jade Light Eximus units, which is a new Eximus unit in this update. But let's get straight into Jade's abilities. First of all, her passive gives her 2 aura slots. Secondly, Jade's first and fourth have the ability to place what's called a judgment on enemies, and enemies inflicted by judgments will receive 50% damage from 50% extra damage from all sources. So it's kind of like the way Barrel works, except not just for health, but for everything. And it's only 50%, and since it's a passive, it doesn't scale or strength or anything, which is a bit unfortunate, but still really good. Her first ability is somewhat like Wisp's first ability, but only the Vitality mode. She will place down a little bubble, which will, while inside of it, just like Wisp's ability, will grant you an infinite duration of the buff. And when you leave it, the buff duration will start to lower. Unlike Wisp's first ability, the actual bubble doesn't have unlimited duration. It actually doesn't tell you how long of duration you have left for the ability, but it doesn't have infinite duration, so it's kind of annoying that it doesn't tell you how long the ability will last. But it will tell you how long your buff will last. So the ability can run out and the buff will still remain, as the buff and the ability are different. You have to go in the aura of the ability to get the buff. Again, very similar to Wisp's modes. What is the buff? Well, it's just a health over time. That's all. However, casting the ability on enemies will do some heat damage to the enemies over time, while also inflicting them with her Judgment passive. So for allies, you'll get health over time. You won't get the extra health that you get from the Vitality buff, just the heal over time. For enemies though, they'll be inflicted with Judgment and take some heat damage over time. Her second ability will give you 1 of 3 buffs. These buffs can be changed while the ability is activated, which will change which buff you're currently receiving. You won't need to recast the ability to do so, but you can only have 1 buff active at any given time. In addition to this, all allies within affinity range will receive this buff. The first buff is a squad weapon damage increase. I'm not sure if it's base damage or multiplicative. Currently, I'm assuming that it is a base damage buff. The next one is a shield's recharge effect. It will increase the speed of your shield recharge while also decreasing your shield delay rate, and it will allow your shields to recharge into overshields. And lastly, you will give yourself and all your abilities, all your allies, power strength. And this power strength can be used to lock it into duration-based abilities. So you've activated a duration-based ability, you can then go and switch your second ability, the buff you get from your second ability, and the duration-based ability will lock in the power strength that you got from your second. Her third ability will slow down any allies within a clone in front of her, while also defense stripping them. That's shields and armor. When enemies have their shields and armor stripped, they will receive a heat prop. When you look away from the enemies will gain speed over time again. However, they will not gain back their armor or shields. The slow is also over time, just like the armor strip is. So they aren't immediately slowed. The slow is 15% per second and does not scale off power strength, and caps out at 90% slow. The armor strip is 10 per second, but does scale off power strength. Her fourth and final ability will allow her to fly up into the sky, giving her access to her Exalted weapon, Exalted secondaries. They have pretty generic stats. They're weighted slightly more towards status, and they do heat and only heat. I have them set up to do blast, which I'll explain why in a second. However, they have a 10%, the primary fire of this weapon has a 10% chance to inflict enemies with Jade's Judgment passive. Enemies inflicted with Judgment will then explode when you use the secondary fire. Enemies inside the Jade's Light ability, which is her first ability, will have the explosion from the old fire deal increased damage. While the ability is active, Jade will receive a damage reduction buff. Since her fourth ability is a channeled ability and her third ability is a duration-based ability, you can snap block the strength from her second ability into her third and fourth ability before casting them and then keep it. Additionally, you tapping the third ability while still activated will reset the duration of the ability, keeping the additional power strength you got from her second. Holding the ability will, however, cancel the ability. And you will of course need to switch back to your strength from your second if you wanted to recast the ability. And the weapon damage from her second ability of course does affect her Exalted. So let's check out the build. So basically the way I've been playing Jade is I don't have any helmet ability because she doesn't really have room for one, at least not with this build. You use the first ability to place Judgment on enemies as well as increase the damage you do with the alt fire. And then you just kill enemies with the fourth ability, both the alt fire and the primary fire. You also keep your third up for the armor strip, and you'll keep your 2 for the get weapon damage. I'm trying to minimize how much I need to switch my 2. So I do cast my 2 for the extra shield at the start of the mission, but from the start of the mission I will then be health tanking instead. I'll just get extra shield so I have time to build up my health with Arcane Blessing. And then I'll use the strength and lock that in with my third and also my fourth. And then I just need to recast my third before it runs out of duration and I can stay on the weapon damage buff for the rest of the mission. As do remember, the first not only is good for exploding enemies with your fourth, but it will also heal you, give you a health regen buff over time. So I will be doing a health tank build. Since her fourth ability does keep you in the air, I am making use of mods like Aviator, Boreal's Hatred, and I'm not going to pronounce that one, which will give you damage reduction while in the air. I am also using Boreal's Contempt on my Polon melee, which will increase the damage reduction while airborne to 40%. So with Aviator and the 2 Boreal mods, we get 80% damage reduction, and with this Aura mod, that will increase that to technically 104%. But the damage reduction cap for the damage in the air is capped at 90%, so these mods will only give you 90% damage reduction. However, do remember that her fourth ability will also give you damage reduction, so I'm getting 50% additional damage reduction from my fourth ability, which gives me 95% damage reduction, and then of course I have my armor damage reduction, or my innate, which is 11% in this case, which will then up my damage reduction to 96.1. Or, if I still have my shields up, my inherent shield damage reduction, which is 50%, meaning you will have 97.5% damage reduction, I think. Also, I just realized that the damage reduction you would have with your armor is not 96.1. I'm not sure what it would be, but it wouldn't be 96.1. But I think you would have 97.5% damage reduction with your shields. And you'll see I do have a lot of shields on this build. That is because Boreal Hatred gives me shields. So I actually will kind of be shield tanking for most of it. But we aren't set up for shield regen. And that you could use your second to regen your shields. But I didn't want to have to swap between it. So I just used Arcane Blessing to be able to rely on health as a health tank. Because I'll be getting heals anyway from my thirst. Steel Charger, this can be replaced with anything. Because this slot is actually anything. It's a universal aura slot where her second aura slot is just the Naramon Vazarin, the Vazarin aura polarity, so like corrupted combat discipline or the mod that I'm using. So you can do it with anything. I'm just using Steel Charger for the extra mod capacity, but you can use whatever aura you want. We are using Cunning Drift in the exit slot. We do not need Prime Sure Footed because she is immune to knockback while in her fourth anyway. And also a lot of stuff wouldn't be able to hit her regardless because she's in the sky. You also have Streamline for ability efficiency. She does actually have a pretty bad energy economy without this, so I do recommend doing it. August Secrets plus Umbral Intensify is our ability strength, and then of course we have our second for additional ability strength. Primed Flow for energy, Primed Continuity for duration, for extra efficiency for our channeled ability, as our fourth is our channeled ability, and also Stretch for range. Do note that casting her fourth ability costs ability, obviously. While you're in her fourth ability, it has a constant drain, and every time you activate the alt fire of her fourth ability, it will drain energy. So the constant drain is affected by duration, while the initial casting and the alt fire is only affected by efficiency. And then you definitely want range for her, because it will increase the explosion range of her alt fire, and also it will increase the range of her thirst, which will get more enemies infected by judgment. Now, I did say I believe the fourth ability is bugged. In missions, the alt fire of her fourth ability does IPS, that's Impact, Puncture, and Slash, which is messing with my DPS. The actual weapon doesn't do it, the weapon only does heat damage, and it doesn't have any different stats on the weapon for the alt fire that would suggest the alt fire and the primary fire have different stats. Additionally, this doesn't happen in the Simulacrum. It only does blast, which is what I've modded for, in the Simulacrum, so I do not know why this is happening in missions. So I believe it's bugged, because it doesn't happen in the Simulacrum. Furthermore, previously, because the weapon does innate heat damage, I used to just mod for cold, because the cold with the innate heat damage would give me blast. But the alt fire was doing cold instead of blast. So it almost as if for some reason the alt fire got rid of the innate heat and replaced it with the IPS, and then my modded cold, giving me cold instead of blast. This is of course fixed by just modding on heat, but again, that didn't happen in the Simulacrum. In the Simulacrum, when I tested it, I got blast. So I believe this is a bug. It's really annoying, as it does actually badly affect the DPS of the build. I hope it gets fixed soon. Archon Energize and Archon Blessing are of course just for survivability and energy. Now let's look straight at the build for the Glory, which is the name of our Exalted. So I've been talking about Blast. Why would I be using Blast? I must be crazy to use what used to be arguably the worst damage type in the entire game. Well, it's good now. Basically, the way Blast works is it no longer, the status effect this is it no longer lowers the accuracy of enemies. Instead, on the initial proc, it will do a little explosion of a portion of the damage dealt to the enemy. Then, after 1.5 seconds, it will deal another explosion of the portion of the damage to enemies. Obviously, if you group a bunch of enemies together, this is going meaning the explosion will all hit them, basically multiplying your damage, making Blast really good now, like really good now. Which is why I can come in with the Simulacrum, summon some enemies, have them grouped together, go into my fourth, cast my one, and then activate the alt fire, and all the enemies are dead. But again, because it's doing IPS as well as Blast on the alt fire in missions, it's messing with the status chance. This weapon only has a base 20% status chance. So with these mods, I only have a 60% status chance, and when you factor in 3 other damage types, it doesn't proc Blast consistently, which severely cuts into the DPS of the weapon. I believe this is a bug because it doesn't function that way on Simulacrum. You can see that it doesn't have any separate stats for the alt fire than the regular fire, so I don't know why this would be happening unless it is a bug. The build, however, is simple. We have Scourge and Frostbite. I do recommend keeping Scorch, even if the bug is fixed and you no longer need to run heat for the blast because of the extra status chance. We are running Galvanized Shot for status chance and base damage, Galvanized Multi-Shot for the, multi-shot, Galvanized Diffusion, Lethal Torrent for fire rate and additional multi-shot, Pistol Elementalist, which is a new mod which will give me status damage, which is basically the buff that you get from Dante's fourth ability, the Birds. This will increase the damage of my status effects. Now, I'm not sure how this works with Blast, as Blast is new with the being a status effect that actually deals damage, but it should work with Blast. Same with the faction mods. I don't know if the faction mods would double dip with Blast, as Blast isn't really a damage over time, like the other damage types who have status effects that deal damage. But I'm going to assume the faction mods will double dip. And obviously, either way, they're still multiplicative damage and will be great. More base damage, and that's pretty much the build. For the companion, I am running Nautilus. That is because you just saw how effective Blast is with enemies grouped, so we want to be grouping enemies, which we will do with Cordon, which will group enemies. Manifold Bond will lower the duration of Cordon. A Guardian for some additional survivability. Primed Regen, Calculated Redirection, Enhanced Vital are just for the survivability of Nautilus. Assault Mode, so Nautilus can attack enemies. Vacuum, because that is a must-have. And Synth Deconstruct for some additional health orb drops. In the empty slot that I don't have a mod in because I haven't formatted this thing, run Momentumous Bond for the additional regen when you kill an Eximus unit. The weapon we'll be using is the Hellstrom, as it is great for priming. As you can see, we just have a bunch of different damage types. We have Impact, Puncture, Electric, Radiation, and Viral, and we just have modded for it. So Speed Trigger and Multi-Shot for the more priming, Status Chance, obviously, Radiation, Viral and Status Chance, and Electricity and Status Chance. Electricity is better than Heat, as it's just better crowd control. But you can run Heat instead of Electricity if you want, that's up to you. Besides that, all of these weapons are just utility weapons. You do need to run a Polon for the Boreal Contempt mod, as it only works on Polons. And you just run any primary or any secondary you want. I would recommend, however, running Amalgam Inspiration on your primary. You would need to run a rifle if you're doing so. This will give you movement speed. I'm unsure how that affects her 4th ability, but I'm going to assume it still affects her 4th ability. And you want to be running Amalgam Barrel Diffusion, because that will give you increased dodge speed, and you can dodge in her 4th ability. So I believe this would also still affect her 4th ability. For the focus school, really I would say run whatever you want except Naramon, because we're not using a melee build. I'm just running Xenoric for additional energy economy, but you can run whatever you want. You can go into her 4th ability and then go into your operator and back into her 4th ability like so. So it does work well with focus schools. It's up to you which focus school you want to run. Anyway, that's my first go ahead of making a Jade build. I'll probably come up with some new ideas later down the track for her, but that's currently what I have for her. She is a really fun Warframe, though I wish this bug or whatever it is with her 4th ability gets fixed, as it is destroying her DPS right now. And she does show off Blast, the new Blast, really well, because the new Blast is really powerful on her 4th ability. Anyway, do check out some of the other stuff I do. Check out my Twitch channel, as I live streamed the update and farming Jade and some testing of Jade and other Warframes on my Twitch channel today, and I'll probably be live streaming a bit more going into the future. Check out my clan Discord if you want to join, hang out with some people, or join our clan. We do giveaways twice a month, and we have a fashion frame contest that lasts for the whole month, every month as well. And the winner of the fashion frame contest will get a plat prize. So if you want to participate in those, do check out my Discord. And until next time, bye bye.